Italian breakdown is focused on getting the meat cuts that we end up with into a salt cure, because it focuses on dry cured hams and salami. So therefore we cut the primal cuts of the hog are focused on that. When you do an American breakdown, they're focused on fresh commodity cuts that you're going to use for grilling or roasting, and that's why the American breakdown is different, because they want hams and shoulders and stuff that we use for barbecue and for pork chops and things like that. The Italians don't use it for that much at all, so their cuts are focused on getting the best shapes and the best sizes for salt curing and dry curing. So that's the main difference. And I'll try to do some anatomy descriptions as I go. First thing we're going to do is take the head off. The head we will use. The head has two pieces that are commonly used in the South in America and in Italian. It's the jowls, and in Italian those are salt cured and dried to make guanciale, and in here we make smoked hog jowls out of them. I don't know what the Yankees do with them. Grind it up into sausage, I guess. Next step is we're going to split this thing right down the middle, which is easy except for the spine. We want to split the spine neatly in the middle, which is easy with a mechanical saw. It's a little trickier with a hand saw, but we're still going to be able to achieve it. So we're going to take the meat all the way down by hand to the spine. We're going to take the prosciutto off first, and the way we do that is I remove the tail, counted up the tail is just a continuation of the vertebrae from the spine. And if you remove that correctly, it gives you your starting point for your prosciutto cut right there. If not, you got to count in vertebrae to do it right. So the prosciutto, if we were doing this ham, American style, we'd come across and down so that we would preserve the loin. The Italians don't care about the loin as much, and so they do a straight cut right across where that tail vertebrae ends right there. Our meat cuts so that we see that beautiful. This would be like gray and tan meat on a commodity hog, and you see that nice beautiful red color there. That's all because this hog was fed well and allowed to roam free and use those muscles. All right, so that's all there is to it. There is a big, what would be the femoral artery on a human. It's got a different name on a hog. I can't remember what it is, but it runs from the H-bone all the way through here, and that has to be cleared out of blood, or that will sour and it'll totally ruin your ham. A lot of times in the hanging process, it drains out enough that it's not a big deal. And our spara off of it, and we're going to come in, if you look at your diagrams there, we're going to come in 6 ribs, and between the 6th and 7th rib is where we're going to make this next cut. Once again, we'll do all our knife work first. You have to find that first one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is a little tricky because you want it as straight as possible, but the ribs angle a little bit.
You want it on?
Yeah, they're turning it on right now. So really the same thing we did. We just cut away the meat to the spine. The only difference there was that we did have to navigate between some rib bones. So we're going to go ahead and take these two and get our hocks and our feet off while we're at it. And we're just going to do that. I'm just going to do that quickly because it's not very glamorous. So one of the trickier cuts is this next one. And you give yourself some guidance here, is taking this the copa off the spalla. So we're going to do that next. And the reason it's tricky is because you've got a diagonal bone structure here that curves, and you want a nice straight cut. So we're going to start in, and the way I gauge it is I look where this line comes across from the vertebrae through. You don't want to mess up that eye of that beautiful muscle. You want your hams and any of your salt cured products to be nice and even. So we start there and draw a straight line across.
That's the pork loin and the pork chop.
That's pork loin. And what's different about this is that the pork loin stops here. This is considered part of the neck. You smoke neck bones and all that come from this right here. So I'm just following the natural seam of the pig where it tells me to go. There's some little bitty knuckle cartilage bones in here that you can kind of just power your way through with the knife, except for that one. And then when you get to one you can't deal with, so I left that bone there. And this, we will trim this bone out. Because we want this piece of meat to be completely boneless.
This is a nice flat one, so it's tricky to get out.
Then we will go ahead and, while we've got it nice and manageable, we'll get this skin off so it's ready to go in the cure. We'll judge later how much we want to leave connected to this ham, this whole muscle salumi. But any of that we decide not to leave connected to this cut is really good for grind. So that's back fat, that's creamy, beautiful stuff. As a matter of fact, there's a salumi that is made that is just this fat. We're all familiar with fat back, right? We see it in the grocery store. Well, there's an Italian version that's salt cured, and they just slice it thin, or they whip it and spread it on bread. It's really delicious. The spalla, this piece that's left, is really tricky. And what I like to do with it, and it's the most delicious thing to do with it, but it's also the most work, is I like to make speck, which is a Italian cured, heavily seasoned and smoked ham. And we bone this out, and it's a little bit tricky. So because it's time consuming, I will come back to that later perhaps. So we can get those ribs off later and eat those. Those are yummy. All right, I may need a hand on this, I don't know. This end gives us a chance to look at some hazards that we need to deal with, and that's these glands. You see all these glands here? Those are all not good to accidentally leave connected to a ham, so we got to really look for those. And before I put the prosciuttos in the cure, I'll go back and look for all those too, because there's quite a few of them in here, and you want to make sure we remove all those glands. They are gross. All right, so we're going to remove the copa from this one. We've got even more of a curve in this one, so it could be even a little trickier. Did you notice I stopped talking a little bit? Because even though this probably looks like it's really easy, I'm sweating like a pig. Yeah. It's a little bit tricky. It's a little bit, there's a little more muscles involved than you think. So you'll see that I'm creating a seam here by taking out this blade bone. And that's problematic later. Another thing that's problematic is when you get your fingers in here and they get really good and cold, they get numb, and you can literally lose track of where your knife tip is, and you can cut a good chunk of your finger off and not even feel it. Don't ask me how I know that. So you have to be really cautious when you've had your fingers inside the pork for an extended period of time. So I'm just going to go ahead and take these ribs off because they're begging me to take them off, whereas I didn't on the last one. Just taking them off? Because they're not going to cure. They're not going to be good on the ham. You don't want a bone in a ham cured product unless you have to. And these are good by themselves. So that's the practical reason. Good by themselves, not good. A few more glands here. So the next part's pretty easy, other than the fact that you got to put some muscle into the bone. You want to follow the natural loin line and cut off what's called, in Italian, the lanza. We call it the loin. And this loin's going to be a little bit different. So we've got the loin here. You guys can all see it. Right here. And right here. So these would be your sirloin chops, and these would be your center cut loin chops. Or your boneless pork loin, all that comes from there. And then this big flap here, from here down, is your belly. And you can see that this one has really contracted in since it was eviscerated. And that actually is a residue. I don't want to be gross, but that's a residue from rigor mortis. When the animal dies, all the muscle tissue hardens up and this contracts. And when they dump the guts out, it still stays contracted and it doesn't smooth out again until you take it off the bone. So what we're going to do here is follow the natural seam of the loin all the way down in a big straight line. All the way to the bone, which is the ribs. And you'll see you got these big, long ribs here. And, you know, that's a big, on a commodity hog, they would be, 4 inches longer. And you've got also this big, huge flap muscle here that is really good to grind. It's good for other stuff too, and that's just going to be in the way later, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of it. Anybody know what that would be on a cow?
T-bone.
Fajitas, skirt steak. All right, so we got that cut down. All right, now you're going to really see me sweat. You see how I got it positioned here where it's right in my power zone? What you want to do, you don't want to try to cut at awkward angles. So, we've got this belly, right? And we got this nice chunk of sirloin still connected to that. That does not roll up well. We're going to try to use this to make pancetta. Once we get the ribs off, we're going to roll this and make pancetta out of it. So we want to have it roll nicely. And that piece right there, though not addressed in the Italian Big 8, is a cut that they traditionally sneak off of there and eat when no one's looking, because it's yummy. And cook it fresh. Yeah, they'll grill it up or something like that, make snacks while they're doing the salami. This big sirloin eye right there, that chunk right there is just a beautiful, nice piece of meat. And you can grind it, and a lot of times it does get ground. With the American way of butchering, the ribs are much more valued. So they cut it differently so that the ribs are intact, all of them. So we cut through. These are the back ribs. So your back ribs, and they're only baby back ribs if they're on animals that are less than 150 pounds, 150 pounds or less. So these are just back ribs. On a smaller animal, they're baby back ribs, literally from a baby cow, pig. So this, we will pound out a little bit. We'll square it off, and then we'll take the skin off and we'll roll it into pancetta and cure that. This will make 2 lanzas. What else comes from this cut? We said it's pork chops, boneless pork loin. What cured product that's fairly common comes from this cut that's from a country not too far from here? Canadian bacon, very good. So bacon just means something that's salt cured and smoked. A lot of countries have, like the Germans use that flap because they do other stuff with the belly. Canadians will turn this into bacon. So you can turn other parts into bacon. It doesn't have to always be the belly. It's just what we're used to here. So this bone squares off and you have to come underneath it. So once again, we've got this little piece here. It's a continuation of that chunk we took off on the other cut. That is not gonna be good. You can see where the loin starts. There's that big blade bone there. So this, you can cure this and make it into another separate little ham, or you can just grind it. We're gonna grind it in this case. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the skin off. The front leg, this would be the picnic ham. And from here up, if we cut it right there, would be the Boston butt. So we've done this Italian style, so it's a little bit different. And what we're gonna wanna do is bone this thing out and take the skin off. And it's not simple to do that, trust me. There's a lot of skin, there's a lot of curves, and a lot of weird stuff going on with it. So everybody always looks at this when I'm doing this, and they're like, that looks really hard. How do you do that, chef? I'm like, well, I just cut everything that's not bone away. You just follow the bone. The pig kind of tells you where to go. There's seams, there's the bone to guide you. There's connective tissue, and if you just follow what it's telling you, it's not so bad. Big old soup bone, right? So we got some good meat that we can use for grind.